Hey, what's up, everyone? So, today I want to speak a little bit about archetype integration. So, there's lots to be said about archetypes, and I think what I'd like to just speak to is the idea of our center point and in relation to archetypes. So, something that we may have seen is how, especially when it comes to masculine archetypes, that there are four main archetypes. There's the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover, and how they in some ways form an axis right, with at least in one of the models, with the king on top, the magician on the bottom, and the warrior and the lover on opposing sides. And how a lot of our modern speaking of archetypes is how I can jump online, for example, and take a test, and the test will be like, oh, I'm this archetype, or I'm this percentage archetype. And while I see that being useful, it's actually not accurate, at least from a Jungian perspective, who really was the person who brought a lot of this awareness into the world. Archetypes, according to him, are essentially part of the unconscious consciousness. So it's something that we as humans all have are all connected to, right? Now, what is it that we are connected to? Now, what he says is how the archetypes are essentially energies that are at play constantly, right? They're at play within us as individuals, but they're also at play in the world. And how the idea of archetypes that I see being used today is that they're used as a way of fixing ourselves as something, right? As a way of creating identity. And this is actually not quite accurate from my understanding. What's a lot more accurate is how, if we're looking at that access point, it's not so much that I'm, more of this or I'm less of this. We've all seen those kind of grid things, right? Where, we plot ourselves. I'm this much this and I'm this much this, and I draw a line and it gives me a little shape, right? While that's useful as a starting point, right, to give ourselves an idea as to where perhaps we are, the deeper wisdom of this is how, in essence, we are actually, where we are, the self, is actually at that middle point, and how a lot of really perhaps where we're moving towards when it comes to archetypes and integration is finding ourselves back into this steady point. After having been in a world that has perhaps educated us a certain way, or has indoctrinated us a certain way, and maybe pushed us in certain directions based off, what our needs have been, and how we've needed to create safety for ourselves. So, essentially the idea of archetype integration that I really work with is bringing ourselves continually back into the center point. And there are many different ways we can do that. There's the idea of this center point being what I believe being a liminal space, which is essentially a threshold space. It's a space of a void, right, where we can then step into, or we can pull in these other energies, right? And it's really important that if we are stepping into these energies, that we are coming back to our center point. If we're drawing from these energies, that it's really important that we release these energies, and that we come back to a sense of stillness without these energies kind of pushing and pulling us in different directions. So this is a really important piece around archetype integration, is bringing these pieces into our awareness, but also not identifying with them so much, right? Maintaining our self, maintaining our identity that is, in essence, again, may draw from or may be influenced by these archetypes, but being really clear about who's in the driver's seat, essentially, right? We see in our modern world that it's very often, we can see very clearly how certain archetypes are very much in the driver's seat of how we operate. And the challenge of this is how typically, if our archetypes, or if a archetype is allowed to run its course, it will very most often end up in a shadow form, right? Even if we are speaking of, let's say, the sovereign, the king, it's very easy for that to turn into a tyrant, right? That's kind of the ultimate form, or the ultimate form of that, and kind of how it manifests without there being the balance, right? For example, if we're talking about the king, a king can very easily turn into a tyrant without the balancing of the magician, right? So if I'm holding myself as the king, and that's how I'm relating with the world, how I'm relating with myself, it's very easy, again, for that to turn to shadow, and without and in that kind of way of living, where's the magician, right? The magician almost has no place because all I am is the king, right? And so it's really important, again, to bring ourselves back into this middle point so that we can access both of these energies, both of these you know yeah, both of these aspects, and really harmonize the energies that are always going to be at play, within these axes. So that's what we got here today: archetype integration, a little bit of play with that. All right, everyone, until next time.